when we're doing conducting research, in the same way as any part of society or group of society has rules, norms, legal procedures and principles that guide behaviour and conduct in any area of society, then in a similar way, those involved in research have to have these principles, norms, rules to guide conduct and to ensure that what's being done is being done in a morally proper way. Now, that's a fairly contestable question. Hence, I guess, the discipline of ethics rolls on as we seek to explore these things. It's important to remember that the law and ethics aren't the same. Something can be legal and unethical, and can be ethical and illegal. So there are lots of questions around this. The other thing about ethics as well, and it's a huge issue, of course, but ethics can also serve in its own way as a method in itself, or as a perspective on a question. If you take, for example, environmental ethics, or even the ethics of austerity, a very hot topic at the moment, you might have the topic of austerity being looked at by an economist who would look at costs and benefits and issues to do with that around austerity, whereas somebody coming at it as an ethicist or from an ethical point of view would look at austerity in a very different way, not unrelated from economics, of course, but to do with the morality and the rightness or the wrongness of what's going on. The bottom line question, or the top line question in ethics is, what is the right thing to do? And that governs the process. The top three tips for ethical decision making or ethical guidance in conducting research. Ethics is very often it's so important that it's codified into sets of procedures, guidelines and rules by particular bodies such as the university, which will have its own ethical frameworks. And I think it's really important. A top tip is to know that, make yourself aware of the ethical framework in which you're operating, rather than necessarily go off looking for a set of ethical principles that you think might suit you in what you're doing. Ethics research is usually conducted in that kind of academic environment or other environment. It could be a government agency, but regardless, you should know the ethical framework in which you're operating. And the second one, I think, is very much related to that. It's to be aware of and adhere to ethical regulation and professional codes of conduct, professional guidelines, and the norms within your discipline. If, for instance, the research is in health research, then there will be very clearly codified rules, regulations, and professional guidelines for conducting research. That's a key point. It's also important to be aware of legal regulations as well, of what the law is in regard to the research that's being conducted. Now, these are, if you like, possibly they're not top tips that are particularly original, but these are things that have to be observed and due cognizance taken of the ethical frameworks, the ethical regulations and professional guidelines, and the legal position regarding the research that's planned or being carried out. If there's one particular aspect or one particular trap to avoid, it's allowing a small item of bad practice into what's going on and thinking or making the mistake of assuming that it's just one little weakness in the ethical framework. It's to try and not allow that kind of leakage of bad practice into what's going on. I think that's an easily made, possibly frequently made error in research, that you should really keep a tight hold on the ethics of what you're doing, not just allowing little bits of bad practice in. In terms of planning research, the ethical aspect of it, I don't actually think it's true that ethics is an aspect of research. Ethics runs through it. It's woven into it. It's integral to it. It's not an extra bit that's added on. So that has to be borne in mind from the outset. I think it's important not to start by taking, here's the project, and let's now look at what we can get away with from an ethical point of view. Ethical research has to be the watchword from the top line. And that how we're going to conduct ourselves when we're doing research is governed by these ethical norms and rules that I've talked about earlier. Remembering that what we're doing, if we're being ethical, we're promoting the aim of the research in the first place. Ethics is about knowledge, truth, the absence of error. It's about doing the right thing. And surely research is about gaining knowledge, finding out the truth, and promoting or removing error from the body of knowledge about a particular topic. So that's important. It's also important as well when conducting planning, conducting research, that we're working with others, so it's an ethical aspect to that as well. There's an ethical aspect to how we collaborate, in that we have to work in an atmosphere of trust, accountability, respect, fairness, confidentiality. All these aspects of ethics or elements of ethics run through research, even down to the confidentiality of, say, peer review, the peer review process, about who, there are sort of first order questions of who's the first author in a research report. All these are questions we can get down to as first order questions from the sort of second order questions of what is the right thing to do and how do we know it's the right thing to do. So it's important to have that in mind from the outset. The principles, if you like, that we bear in mind are we're trying to do good, and we're trying not to harm people, and we're trying to, when this is all about people, I'm assuming that we have to remember that human beings are not in themselves, human beings are not a means to an end. Human beings are, in a sense, an end to themselves, and that comes from a particular ethical framework or a particular ethical theory, a normative theory in ethics. It's also useful to be very aware of the philosophical background, where these ethical theories come from, where these ethical viewpoints find their origins in. For instance, what I'm talking about is ethics or duty-based ethics as opposed to consequence-based ethics. These are quite important distinctions to be made. So before starting research, it's important to be, I think, just as strong an extent as possible, schooled in these philosophical bases for what we're doing.